Test, test.
Once or one more time today?
There will be other lectures as well.
I mean, his lecture, no more today.
No more, this is it.
This is it.
Yeah, so you don't want to miss it.
Okay, Debbie. Started there, no?
Yes. Where?
David, I need trips. How many you need, Russ?
Huh?
How many you need?
We're getting everybody in here. That's why we have the doors open.
Like 5 seconds. If you know what you said?
Test.
Test. Test. Yeah. want that? Hi, good morning. Welcome to the Pasadena Health Fair and Blood Drive 2022. We are so blessed to have such an amazing group of team that will help us today in sharing more about the amazing health that we have and how we could take care of it. This morning we have 4 lectures on health and how we can achieve a good life while we are here on earth. And this morning our first speaker is Dr. Jan Tanner of the Tanner Health, and we're so glad that he and his team with Petra Pushman from the Little Green Forks are here to tell us all about the amazing health that we can have through nutrition. And Petra is doing the food demonstration and tasting, so you're welcome to hear her. She will be here as well with us all day. And so without further ado, I will give now the time to Dr. Jan Tanner and hear about his amazing story on health and nutrition. Doctor?
Thank you so much, Rissa.
You're welcome.
I sure appreciate being here today. This is awesome. The Adventists all over are so dedicated to healthy living, and especially in this church. I love to speak in this beautiful sanctuary. I'm glad to be here today. Glad that you're here. But I'm glad to be here because I almost died. And I almost died needlessly. And the question is, will you die needlessly? We're all going to die at some point, we know that. But you can either live your allotted years or you can cut them short through your own actions. And I hope you will not choose to cut them short. And I'm going to share with you how you can live life to the longest. We're going to talk today about heart disease and just touch on some other diseases really quickly. We're going to talk about health through nutrition and what are some strategies for success in living a long and healthy life. My story really begins, this life-altering event a little over 12 years ago at this time. I live just down the street, just a block north of Washington Boulevard, about a 4-minute drive from here. For 5 years before this date, I ran a mile every day. I'd get out in the morning and I'd run this sort of blue route that you can see there and end up back home. On this particular day, I got to this point in my running route, staggered a couple of steps, hit the ground, unconscious, with my heart stopped. This is how much warning you have of heart disease. It's a disease of the insides of your arteries. You can't see it. There's no nerve endings in there. You can't feel it. You can think you're fine, and the next moment you're dead on the street. I was lucky. People saw me go down. They came and gave chest compressions. The ambulance arrived, took me to the hospital. I survived. Yay, obviously. I wouldn't be here. I started learning some things about heart disease. I want to share some of them with you. You probably know this first one. Heart disease is the leading killer of men and women in this country. You probably knew that. Sometimes heart disease is thought of as a man's disease, and at the younger ages, more men die of heart disease than women do, but at the older ages, more women die of heart disease than men do. So by the time it's all over, it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. If you live in this country, this is the disease that's more likely to kill you than any other disease. But you probably knew that. What you may not be aware of is that sudden cardiac arrest is the most common form of heart disease, most common manifestation. You can have a heart attack where the heart doesn't stop completely. You can have angina, which is just severe chest pain because things are going wrong in there, but the heart more or less is beating normally. It just hurts. But of those 3 things, severe chest pain, heart attack where the heart is laboring but not stopped, or cardiac arrest where the heart comes suddenly to a stop, the most common thing is cardiac arrest. And if that should happen to you outside of the hospital, your chances of surviving are about 3%. So you take these three things together, most common disease, most common form of it, and a really low survival rate. What that means is people are dropping dead all over the place. And we hear it about famous people. It wasn't too long ago that the mayor of San Francisco was fine one day and the next day he's dead of heart disease. But it's not just famous people. Sadly, it's our friends, our coworkers, our family members. Probably everyone in the room here knows at least one person that seemed okay one day and the next day they're gone from heart disease, sudden cardiac arrest. So me having cardiac arrest is not unusual at all. It's very common. Surviving it is kind of uncommon. 1 out of 30, 3% survival rate. And that's part of what drives me to share what I learned with other people, because most people, by the time they know they have heart disease, they're dead. They don't have a chance to learn anything, and they certainly don't have a chance to share what they learned with others. So that's part of what drives me. That day when they got me to the hospital, this is what the doctor saw. My heart is in this region right here. You can't see it too well because the x-rays go right through the muscle tissue. You can see one of my ribs here, another rib down here, spinal column here. And you can see the end of this plastic tube. They cut an incision on the inside of my thigh. They inserted a plastic tube up and around the aorta, which is a fairly big artery, and then they turned the corner into a tiny artery that feeds blood to the heart muscle itself. And this is what the doctor was interested in. He pushes a foot pedal that squirts radio-opaque dye through the tube so you can see it come out there at the end. And so he can see the blood flow through the arteries that feed my heart muscle. So this is what the doctor saw that day, and I want you to tell me if you think you can see where my problem is. Does anybody think they see where the problem is? Are you maybe looking right there? It looks like from this frame of the video that there's no blood getting through there, but we know there's a little bit of blood getting through there, or else we wouldn't see the dye down in this area. And also, if there wasn't anything getting through there, I'd have been dead. That tiny little bit of blood kept me alive. But you can also tell that there's not much getting through there. And that was my problem that day. And what I found out later, and I'm going to be sharing with you in a few minutes the research, I found the research that indicated to me clearly that I did this to myself. And I'm sad to say the vast majority of Americans are doing this to themselves. I would even go so far as to say there may be people in this room that are doing this to themselves, but you don't have to, and I'll share with you how you can avoid doing this to yourself. I did recover. I was only in the hospital for 5 days. I thought that was pretty good. They said, don't go back to work just yet. So I took another week off from work. But 2 weeks from heart stopped on the street to back to work, I thought that was pretty good. But they said, don't go back to running just yet. Because of the 3% who survive, the vast majority of those survivors have residual brain damage or heart muscle damage or both. I seem to be okay on the mental side, fingers crossed. Although, when I forget my anniversary, I say, honey, it was the heart attack. Makes a great excuse. But they wanted to see whether my heart muscle was permanently damaged by the period of time that it wasn't getting enough oxygen. So they did another set of tests called a perfusion test. It involves radioactivity, special imager, and so on. The test results came back, and they were good. My doctor said, you can go back to your life the way it was. And what he meant by that was a very comforting thought you can forget about this traumatic event that put you and your family and your coworkers and so on in turmoil. You can just forget about that. But the more I thought about it, my life the way it was, did that include the heart attack? I sure didn't want to go back to that. And then I started asking more questions about heart disease itself. Was my life the way it was the cause? I didn't really know. Had a lot of doctors telling me it's genetic. That's incorrect, by the way, but that was what I was told. But I was really interested in the answer to this question. Was my life the way it was the cause? What does cause heart disease, and can it be prevented or reversed? And that caused me to really dig into the medical research. My background is in computer science, electronics, robotics. That's my day job. But all of a sudden I was reading medical journals, going to conferences, talking to the experts, and I want to share with you some of the things that I've learned that try to answer these questions. Eventually, I found my way to this Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, who wrote the book called Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. By the way, I think when all of you arrived today, you got a bag with some stuff in it, and there should be in there a packet of things from us that includes a gift coupon. Did everybody get this? At the end, okay. In any case, you can take this gift coupon and take it to our website and choose one of 10 books, which we'll send to you at no cost. One of the books that you might choose is Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease by this doctor. But just in case that isn't your choice, let me share just a couple of key things from this book. This doctor says nearly half the people in the U.S. will suffer heart disease. Not all of those half will die from it, but will suffer from it. That's a big number. He says you should know your cholesterol levels, both total and LDL. And just as importantly as knowing your numbers, you should know what the healthy numbers are. The healthy numbers are 150 for total cholesterol or below, 80 for LDL or below. Some doctors know that these are the healthy numbers, some doctors do not. So you need to know for yourself what the healthy numbers are. If you're not on any medication and your total cholesterol is below 150 and your LDL is below 80, you can leave now, because nothing I can say will reduce your chance of having a heart attack, because you won't have one. But the vast majority of Americans are above these numbers. Some of them are way above these numbers. So by all means, have a blood test, find out your numbers, and compare them to 150 and 80. And if your numbers are, like most Americans, are above this doctor says, fix the problem yourself. Doctors cannot fix this problem. This is a doctor saying that doctors cannot fix the leading cause of death in this country. These two statements are either awesome or scary, depending on what kind of a person you are. If you're the kind of person who wants to live your life however you see fit, and if something goes wrong medically, you'll go to the doctor and they'll fix it, this is scary, because the doctors cannot fix the leading cause of death in this country. But if you're the kind of person who wants to decide for yourself whether you're going to be healthy or sick through your own actions, you want to decide for yourself through your actions whether you're going to live a long time or cut it short, this is awesome news. You can control that. But if you don't fix the problem yourself, the medical establishment has lots of things they would have you do to yourself, or that they would do to you. The first of these is medications. There's a class of drugs called statin drugs. You may have heard this. Some of you may even be on them. The trade names are Lipitor, Zocor, Crestor. There's also generic names, Simvastatin, Atorvastatin, and so on. Turns out these medicines don't work very well, and they're harmful. And I'm going to share more details of the research about that shortly. The next thing the doctors would suggest to you is stents. These are metal mesh tubes that they insert typically through the plastic tube, like the one I had, in through the leg, and they put this metal mesh tube and then they expand it in place, mashing the debris out of the way. These things don't cure heart disease. I'll share statistics in a moment. The next thing the doctors would have you do, or do to you, is coronary artery bypass graft, CABG, sometimes just called bypass surgery. We do 500,000 of these operations in this country a year, and they don't cure heart disease. You may remember that former President Clinton got bypass surgery, and a few years later he had heart disease, because bypass doesn't cure it. We spend $10 billion a year on the drugs alone, and by the time we add in the stents and the bypass surgeries, the total gets to about $50 billion a year. This doesn't even take into account lost wages, lost time at work. Those numbers inflate this by, I think, a factor of 4. But just direct medical costs, $50 billion we're spending on things that don't cure heart disease. But diet can prevent and reverse heart disease, and we'll talk more about that. I believe that one of the reasons, primary reason that heart disease is such a problem in this country is most of us don't have a very good idea about the relationship between what we choose to put in our mouth and what happens inside us as a result. How could we know that? We can't see, once it goes past the teeth, we can't see what goes on inside. Well, here's a couple of little video clips that will help you to understand a little bit about that relationship. Here's Dr. Michael Clapper, who's describing 2 blood samples in front of him that came from different patients. The sample on your left came from a patient who heard the guidance from the doctor, don't eat anything for 10 or 12 hours before you give the blood sample. The patient who gave the sample on the right, not so much. We'll hear more about that. These 2 blood samples were taken, they let them sit for a while, or they can centrifuge them to speed up the process, but it separates out the different components of the blood so they can look at them visually, individually. So here's what the doctor has to say about that.
Now, normally, this liquid layer floating on top of the blood clot is quite transparent. It's yellow, but quite clear. You can see right through it. The blood in this patient's tube, however, was Now, normally, this liquid layer floating on top of the blood clot is quite transparent. It's yellow, but quite clear. You can see right through it. The blood in this patient's tube, however, was anything but clear. The serum floating on his clot was thick and greasy white. It looked like glue. In fact, it stuck to the sides of the blood tube when I shook the tube. I went back to the patient. I said, Mr. Phillips, did you eat before you came to the hospital tonight? He said, yes. I said, what did you have? He said, I had a cheeseburger and a milkshake. And when he said that, I realized that what I was looking at in his tube was all the fat in the beef burger, all the butter fat in the cheese, and the butter fat in the ice cream, and the milkshake.
So the good news is, if at one point in your life you had a cheeseburger and a milkshake, not to worry, your body knows how to clear out this gunky stuff. But it takes hours. It takes 10 or 12 hours for your body to clear this away. What do most Americans do before their body has had a chance to clear this gunk away? They eat some more of the same things, right? So they're bathing the insides of their arteries 24 hours a day, 365 days a year with this gluey gunk. Your body is awesome. It tries to clear that away and probably does so successfully without you noticing any problems for decades. For me, my body did that for 52 years before I noticed. So we don't know exactly when it will cause you this problem, but this is what you do when you eat this kind of stuff. And it's not short, it happens quickly. Within minutes of you eating this stuff, the insides of your bloodstream degrade in this way. Now, we don't know from this video clip whether this guy ate lots of cheeseburgers and milkshakes, but we might guess that that wasn't his first one. And so after a lifetime of eating this way, what do the insides of his arteries look like?
The next morning, we took Mr. Phillips to the operating room, and I put him to sleep, and the surgeon opened up his chest. And from these arteries, we began pulling out yellow, greasy deposits of fatty material called atherosclerosis.
I want you to keep this image in mind the next time you're tempted to reach for a cheeseburger or a milkshake. This is the stuff that you're building up inside your arteries. Now, you need to understand that this roto-rooter job that this guy's getting on his arteries doesn't fix him. The yellow string of deposits that you see there, they actually don't form on the inside wall of the artery. They work their way back past the first layer of cells, the inner skin of the artery called the endothelium, and they build up behind there. So when they're stripping out this guy's deposits of cholesterol, they're stripping out the inner lining of his artery. That actually makes him less healthy and shortens his life. So they don't do this kind of surgery anymore. But I just wanted you to see so that you could see with your eyes, what you're doing to yourself when you eat cheeseburgers and milkshakes and other things. We'll get to precisely what the healthy diet is in a moment. Let's talk about cholesterol blood tests. Cholesterol is a natural substance. It's in your body. Some of it should be there. Your liver produces it. Any place your body is creating new cells, the cell walls are made of lipids, that is the cholesterol. So you need a little bit of it, and you need just the right kind, and your liver generally produces just the right amount, just the right kind. The other source of cholesterol in your bloodstream comes from the animal products you eat. We're talking about meat, eggs, dairy. No plant product whatsoever has cholesterol. So you can't get cholesterol from eating plants. But when they take a blood test, they're measuring the cholesterol that was in the blood because your liver produced it, and it was supposed to be there, plus the cholesterol that's in your blood because of the animal products you've eaten recently. And the cholesterol in the blood it's not like a threshold of poison that it gets to a certain level and you keel over. No, it's a long-term exposure of your arteries to an elevated cholesterol level that causes the problem. It turns out, though, that the measurement of the blood, the cholesterol in the blood, is a good indicator of how likely you are to die of heart disease. The Framingham Heart Study established this correlation. They measured cholesterol in people for decades and then tracked to see what percentage of them died of heart disease. And they found that under some conditions, this is an effective diagnostic tool. The one exception is if you take medications, and we'll get to that in a moment. But if you're not on any medications, this blood test is a really good indicator of how likely you are to die of heart disease. Again, if you're under 150 and 80, it's not going to happen. You're not going to die of heart disease. If you're in the 200s or 300s, you better get yourself to the emergency room real soon. So I'm a patient of Kaiser Permanente, and when I get a blood test, it comes back and it says, here's your number, and here's the standard number that you can compare your number to. And the standard that they give is 200. But the Framingham Heart Study says you need to be under 150. What's this 200? I asked them. And they said, well, we get that from the American Heart Association. So I contacted the American Heart Association and said, where does this 200 come from? And they said, well, that's roughly the average of all Americans. Okay, this is average among a group of people whose leading cause of death is heart disease. You do not want to be average. You want to be healthy. So don't believe that 200 is okay. It's not. The Framingham Heart Study found that a third of the people with heart disease had cholesterol between 150 and 200. So being below 200 is definitely better than being above 200. You'd rather be in the 1/3 category than the 2/3 category, but don't believe that's okay. In fact, I'm a great example of that. My last blood test before my cardiac arrest, my cholesterol was 188. So if you have somebody, a doctor or somebody telling you that, oh, you're under 200, you're okay, I beg to differ. It needs to be under 150. Let's talk about the statin drugs for a moment. There was a study that came out in June 2010 that looked at the relationship between the cholesterol blood test after taking statin drugs and your likelihood of death. And what they found is that if you take the statin drugs, the cholesterol blood test does go down, making you think you're healthier, but you still die nearly as often. Let me draw an analogy. If you're driving your car and the red check engine light comes on, you understand that the red light itself is not the problem. It's an indicator that there's a problem deep inside your engine. But you know that's serious and you better not ignore it, and so you take it to the mechanic. The mechanic returns your car the next day and the check engine light is off, and you think, yay, mechanic fixed my car. But then if you happen to look under the dashboard and you saw the wires going to the red light, and they looked like this, you might determine that, in fact, the mechanic had not fixed the problem. He had just disabled the indicator, making you think he had fixed the problem. And I think you would be pretty angry at your mechanic if you saw that. So don't let these statin drugs fool you into thinking you're better just because the blood test goes down. Now, why do the doctors encourage us to take these medicines if they don't help very much? And what are they actually doing? What the statin drugs do is they inhibit the liver's natural production of cholesterol. Let me put this a different way. The statin drugs are liver poisons. They are toxins to the liver that you are encouraged to introduce into your body to interfere with the liver's natural production of cholesterol. They do nothing about the cholesterol in your bloodstream from the animal products you ate. So these drugs are getting rid of the natural stuff through hurting your liver while not doing anything about the unnatural cholesterol in your body. You can maybe see why they don't work all that well. And they have side effects. One of the big problems is liver damage. Not a surprise, you're taking liver poisons. When I took these drugs after my cardiac arrest for about a year before I understood this, the fine print that came with the drugs said, if you take statin drugs for any length of time, you should get a standard liver test, and if that liver test shows damage, you should discontinue the use of this medication. If you look now in the statin drug fine print, you won't find that. Why? Did they find that statin drugs don't cause liver damage? No. They found that the liver damage caused by the statin drugs can't be picked up by the standard liver test, which was designed for alcoholism. So just because you've got a liver test that says you're okay doesn't mean your liver's okay. These statin drugs also cause muscle issues. It varies highly from person to person. Some can take a pretty big dose of statins and their muscles are only a little bit sore. Some people, on even a small dose, their muscles are very sore. And then the big one for me, side effect of statin drugs, is brain damage. Let me describe what I mean by that. There's a set of symptoms that look a lot like Alzheimer's. That is short-term memory loss, cognition issues, concentration problems. Alzheimer's can't be diagnosed definitively until death. They do an autopsy and they actually look at your brain tissue. But the doctors will often give a tentative diagnosis of Alzheimer's based on symptoms. But they're finding more and more that these people that they think have Alzheimer's, they're on statin drugs. They take them off the statin drugs and they get better. So that means it couldn't have been Alzheimer's, because Alzheimer's doesn't get better. There's no known treatment to improve Alzheimer's. But a lot of people are falsely being diagnosed with Alzheimer's caused by the statin drugs. This, to me, is the biggest issue with statin drugs. This looks like a really intelligent group. You guys probably have lots of extra brain cells. I need all of mine working all the time, so I can't spare any. And this is a big problem with statin drugs, and I haven't taken them in years and will not take them again. As I read medical journals, I would run across these interesting studies, research studies. And there are 5 of them that I want to report on here. They're all independent studies, but I can put them all in one graph to compare them by matching up the control groups. That is, a good study has a group of patients, 2 groups that are similar in all ways, except one of them gets treatment and one of them doesn't. So they can tell what the treatment difference is. So the first one of these studies comes from Duke University, where they had a lot of people coming into their medical center as candidates for stents. These are these metal mesh tubes that they stick into the artery and expand in place. And they took half of the people that were candidates for stents and gave them the stent. The other half, they didn't get the stent. They tracked both groups for years and they eventually published the death rates associated with each group. Now, I took the death rate associated for the group that didn't get the stents, and I plotted that to be 100%. And then I did the same visual scaling to the death rate for the group who got the stents. Now, if stents are a really effective treatment, you would expect that bar to be a lot lower. Here it is. 97% of the people that would die without the stent still die. Is that a very effective treatment? No. Well, what about these statin drugs? So the next study I'm going to talk about, they took a large group of people. They're all elevated cholesterol, all high risk of heart disease. They gave half of them statin drugs, half of them didn't get statin drugs, and they measured their cholesterol blood tests after a period of time. The group that didn't get the statin drugs, I scaled that to be 100%. The group that got the statin drugs, I scaled their blood test results to the same way, and here it is. Ladies and gentlemen, statin drugs work. They work to lower the blood test measurement. Do we care about the blood test measurement? Only if it's an indicator, a valid indicator of likelihood of death. Well, instead of looking at this indicator, let's look at the actual death rate. So this next one study is the June 2010 study I mentioned before. 65,000 patients, all high cholesterol, at risk for heart disease. They took half of them, gave them statin drugs, half of them didn't get statin drugs, tracked both groups. What are their death rates? The death rate for the group that didn't get the statin drugs, I scaled to 100%. Applied the same scaling to the death rate for the group who got the statin drugs. There it is. 91% of the people that would have died without the statin drugs still die. Now, I can't say there's no benefit, although the author of the study said exactly that. Within the error bounds of this research, he said, we cannot conclude any benefit of statin drugs. But let me just say, mathematically, the most likely thing is 9% reduction in death. What really annoys me about this, though, is the doctors, when they're prescribing these drugs, they don't share with the patients how really abysmal the benefit is. They don't talk about the negative consequences, brain damage, liver problems, and so on. And without knowing that, you're not encouraged to look at other alternatives. Well, let me share with you two other studies. The next one of these comes from the UK, where they ask people, what do you eat? And they eat pretty much like we do here. Most of them eat a standard Western diet that includes meat and cheese and dairy and eggs. And what's like here, some fraction of them just choose to not eat meat. They would be called vegetarians. A vegetarian still might eat dairy, cheese, and eggs, but just no meat. So this group that identified that they were vegetarians, and then the rest of the bigger group that ate like most Americans, they tracked them for years while keeping track of what they ate. And eventually they published the death rate due to heart disease for the two groups. The ones who ate standard American diet, that was 100%. The group who just cut meat out of their diet, here's their death rate. Now, you can say, well, there's still a lot of red here, and maybe if you kind of squinted, you'd say, well, that's not that different than here. There's a lot of red there too. But don't look at the red, look at the white above. How much lives are we saving? 9% here, like 30, 35% here. This is 3 times more effective at reducing the death rate than the best drug that we have. 3 times better. Interesting. There's one more study I want to share with you. Preliminary study came from Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, and it was written up in this book that I described earlier. It involved 18 patients, and I found it fascinating. But he was criticized for making assumptions that what happened with 18 people would happen with a bigger group. And so he got with some other researchers, they raised some money, and they did a bigger study, involved 200 patients. Each patient he brought into his office one at a time, and he said, you're at high risk for heart disease. I want you to eat this particular way. I think it's going to make a huge difference for you. And I'll share in a moment just exactly what that diet was. But for now, we'll just call it the ideal diet. 90% of the patients said, yeah, doc, I'm in. I'm really going to do my best to really stick to this diet. The other 10% said, you're asking me to give up things that I really love eating. I'm not willing to do this. Fine, stay in the study. Keep eating the way you are, but we want to track you. So over the years, they tracked the death, not just the death rate due to heart disease, but 4 other coronary events as well. They call them coronary events. As death due to heart disease, a heart attack that doesn't result in death, angina, that's chest pain, stent emplacement, or bypass surgery. So they tallied up these 5 coronary events per patient for the group who didn't change their diet, and I scaled that to 100%. I applied the same visual scaling to the cardiac event rate for the group who adopted the ideal diet. And I'm about to show you the height of that red bar, but I would like each of you to think to yourself before you see this red bar, how low does it need to go before it's important to you? I think you would agree that it has to be below this level If it turns out the red bar is higher, well, we won't do that. We'll do the vegetarian thing. But how low does it need to go before it's important to you? Does everybody sort of have a number or a height in mind? Ready to see the red bar? 1%. And that 1% is questionable. It might actually be 0. What does this say? The leading cause of death in this country just goes away if you eat the right things and avoid eating the wrong things. Wow. Why doesn't everybody know that? Why doesn't every doctor tell us this? Some are. We need more of those type of doctors. I know there's some associated with this church that are spreading the word. What are the consequences of this result? This result says, if you eat properly, you don't have heart disease. The converse of that is, if you have heart disease, you're not eating properly. What does that mean? If you have heart disease, it's your fault. This is the study that convinced me that restriction that you saw in my heart, that was my fault. Because that doesn't happen when you eat properly. Wow. So, sorry. Here's some photos. This is from his book. This is a gentleman who had a problem with his coronary artery, the distal left anterior descending coronary artery. This is also referred to as the widowmaker. It was the same artery that was clogged in my case. Although in my case, you could see there's only one spot that was sort of clogged. This guy has this whole region that is clogged. So they couldn't stent it. He didn't have any choice but to go down the hall to this wacky doctor who was saying, change your diet. But they had a reason to go in and look at this artery 2.5 years later after this guy switched his diet. Same artery. Wow. It cured itself. Your body has an amazing ability to recover if you stop abusing it 3 times a day, every day. This artery healed itself. So you can reverse a lot of heart disease if you get on the right diet. So what is the diet? We'll start with the things that are killing us. Red meat, you knew that. Didn't have to tell you that. But what you may not be aware of is that pork and chicken and fish are equally bad. Why? They have animal protein, which is inflammatory. Really don't want to be eating that. And they have animal fat that once you've inflamed the interior walls of your arteries, that cholesterol can get through there and start building up these deposits. What's even worse than these meats is dairy, milk, butter, cheese, ice cream. Some researchers call cheese the most damaging substance on the planet, due not only to its causing heart disease, and we won't have time to talk about it today, but it also has a big effect on cancer. So you really want to avoid all the dairy products. Eggs, why? Animal protein, animal fat. Processed foods are not good for us. I put a donut there as a placeholder, but there's a whole bunch of foods you can probably imagine: cookies, candies, sugary cereals, all those kinds of things, not good for us. And here's a kind of a surprise. Vegetable oil is not good for us. And not only vegetable oil in cooking, but vegetable oil finds its way into a huge number of products, including almost all chips. Lots of salad dressings have oil in them, fake butters, and things that seem like they might be healthy, like granola bars. Look in there and you'll see lots of vegetable oil. Not good for us. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't eat any of these things. That's your choice. But I'm saying the science is really, really clear. You choose to eat these things on a regular basis, and the most likely outcome for you is heart disease and you in a casket before your time. Your choice. Or you could perhaps choose to eat other things. You might choose to eat a whole bunch of colorful vegetables of all kinds. Awesome. Heavy emphasis on leafy greens that are great. Fruits in moderation. Beans are great for you. Whole grains, including corn, oatmeal, brown rice. White rice is okay, brown is better. Whole wheat, not that processed white stuff, but whole wheat. Potatoes are awesome nutritionally. The problem with potatoes in our country right now is the company they keep. You take a healthy potato and you slice it and you cook it, fry it in oil, you've just made a healthy thing unhealthy. You take a wonderful healthy baked potato and you slather on butter or fake butter or cheese, you've just made it unhealthy. What is even healthier than potatoes is sweet potatoes. There are societies on this planet that eat nothing but sweet potatoes. They have no heart disease. They have no colon cancer. You could just eat sweet potatoes if you want. I'm not saying that you should eat only these foods, but I'm saying the science is really, really clear. If you choose to eat only these things, the most likely outcome for you is living a lot longer. Depending on the study, it's somewhere between 14 and 20 more years. That's a lot. So that might be the difference between just seeing your kids grow up and seeing your grandkids grow up. Awesome. And the closest you come to the graveyard in your old age is when you run through and you see the gravestones of the people who ate the stuff on the previous slide. Now, what may be more important to you than those extra years is the quality of those years. In this country, the average number of years of disability before death is 9. So most of us have 9 years that really are not good. I'm tempted to use a worse word for that, but and that's the average. It can be much longer. Our medical system is really good at keeping us alive after life is hardly worth living. You can have a heart attack where you can't walk. You can have a stroke where you can't talk. You can have crippling arthritis, but you're still alive. So you can have 9 years like that and then die. Or if you eat this diet, those disabling diseases go away. You can have those 9 years of healthy, vibrant life, followed by 14 to 20 more years of healthy, vibrant life, all based on your choices of what you're going to eat. The researchers call this ideal diet a low-fat, whole food, plant-based diet. You're probably familiar with the word vegan. Vegan means no animal products, and certainly you want to be vegan, but vegan isn't enough by itself. You want to eat vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and legumes. You want to eat no meat or fish, no eggs or dairy products, no oils, including olive oils, not healthy, no processed foods, and the low fat comes in here. You want to have less than 10% of your total calorie consumption to be from fat. You need a little bit, and it's naturally in plant foods in a little bit. But where does the fat come from in our diet? Standard American diet, fat calories are 35%. Some of the researchers suggest 7% is about ideal, so Standard American eats 5 times the percentage of fat that they should. Well, how do you get this fat out of your diet? Well, you got rid of the animal products. There goes a lot of it. Yay. You got rid of the oils. A lot of that fat goes away. But there's a small number of whole plant foods that can be still problematic. And that includes nuts and seeds, coconut, and avocado. These are high-fat products. Now, notice that this guideline is in gray instead of black, so it's not quite as firm a guideline, but still important. And there's an asterisk there. And the asterisk means if you're totally healthy by a whole set of measures, you can safely eat a little bit of nuts, coconut, and avocado without endangering your health. Totally healthy means you're without medications, your cholesterol is below 150 and your LDL is below 80. Without medications, your blood sugar is below 100. Without medication, your blood pressure is below 120/80, and you've never been diagnosed with heart disease or cancer. And your weight is in the normal range, not overweight, based on the body mass index. If all of those health metrics apply to you, you can safely have a little bit of nuts, coconut, and avocado. A little bit of nuts means some slivered almonds on your salad. Great. It doesn't mean I'm going to open a 16-ounce jar of Planters peanuts and eat it all in one go in front of the football game. That's not healthy for anybody. If you're totally healthy, a little bit of coconut is okay. Some shavings on a dessert or an entree is fine. It doesn't mean, oh, I'm going to avoid that nasty ice cream by going with a non-dairy frozen dessert, which is made up of 90% coconut oil, which is almost all saturated fat. That's not healthy for anybody. If you're totally healthy, a little bit of avocado, some slices on your green salad is fine. Doesn't mean making a quart of guacamole and eating it all at once. That's not okay for anybody. And be cautious with soy products and fruit juice. Whole soy is great. There had been a scare a while back that soy products cause cancer. It turns out, no, when they look at it, it actually reduces cancer if you're eating them in the whole form. There's a lot of vegan meats that are using heavily processed soybeans. They strip it down chemically and take out the fats and the carbohydrates, leaving you with isolated soy protein, and then they extrude that into things that seem like meat. Not so healthy. Still better than real meat, because the soy meats don't have any cholesterol in them, but you really want to be cautious with soy. Eat it only in whole form. That means soy milk, edamame, tempeh, tofu. Those are great. Just don't eat the heavily processed stuff. And fruit juice is okay in moderation with some cooking. But if you're taking your 44-ounce big gulp Coca-Cola and replacing it with 44 ounces of fruit juice, that's not much better. Here's Caldwell Esselstyn, and what he says is, some people think whole food plant-based diet is extreme. We hear that a lot. A diet that has no animal products? That's extreme. He says, 500,000 people a year will have their chests opened up, a vein taken from their leg and sewn onto their coronary artery. Some people would call that extreme. So if you're struggling with this, getting rid of all meat and dairy from your diet, think of yourself on that operating room table, and the surgeon has his buzz saw, and he's about to cut open your chest bone and pull it open so they can do this surgery. Then you might say, avoiding that by eating less beef and more broccoli, maybe that's not so extreme after all. We don't have time today to talk about these other diseases. I do give lectures once a month that are longer than this, and we have a chance to address some other diseases. But the Center for Disease Control publishes their list of the top 15 killers in this country. I've taken them and put them onto this pie chart based on not only their size, but also I've grouped them according to whether these deaths are due to our food choices or not. And if you add them up, you get that 2/3 of the deaths in this country are because of our food choices. Now, it'd be very dramatic if I could turn to you and say, if you don't get on this diet, you will die as a result of that choice. But I can't say that, because 1/3 of the people who eat really lousy die of other things. They get hit in car accidents and get murdered and so on. So it's not a sure thing that you'll kill yourself by eating poorly, but it's very likely. So what does this mean? It means 2/3 of the deaths in this country, that's 1.3 million Americans, die needlessly every year because of their food choices. Thought of another way close to home, think of yourself and the 2 other people you love the most. If the 3 of you insist on eating the standard American diet, statistically 2 out of 3 of you are going to die needlessly. And I hope that doesn't happen. The right diet can prevent and reverse heart disease, cancer, diabetes. Some of these other diseases aren't as nearly 100% as heart disease, but still very significant. High blood pressure. There's a whole set. Every time I go to a conference, I come away with 2 or 3 more diseases that just go away if you eat this diet. It's amazing. The great news is it's the same diet. If you had to decide between an anti-cancer diet and an anti-heart disease diet that were different, that would be a tough choice, because those are the top 2 killers. But with this one diet, you get rid of almost all heart disease, most of cancers, and a whole bunch of other things. Yay. So what are the steps to long life and health? My recommendations: learn everything you can. The fact that you're here is awesome. But since this is a topic that is responsible for the deaths of 2/3 of Americans, I think it's worth some time to spend learning some more. We'll be happy to give you a book from the coupon that's being handed out, so maybe that can help you learn some more. Doctors in this country, 3/4 of them have minimal requirements to learn about nutrition in medical school. So most doctors get out knowing essentially nothing about the relationship between food and death. They know virtually nothing about the thing that causes 2/3 of the deaths in this country. When you find the doctor that knows about it, hang on to them. They're gems. Many of them don't. And you need to be smart enough that you can advocate for yourself and know the damage caused by medications and procedures. So learn, learn, learn. Once you know what you need to do, make the change to a healthier diet. Sadly, there's likely to be challenges associated with that. You know, what do you do when you go to your friend's house and they're offering some food that they just made by hand that you know is unhealthy? You know, how do you avoid that? But you can, with diligence, you can learn to overcome these challenges. And then I ask you to help others through these 3 steps. Here's what some of the things I'm doing to try to help people. I made this nonprofit organization called the Nutrition Science Foundation. We give talks, we give out free books. There's a website there. Your packet that includes the red brochure, that's for New Sci. So you can use that to find your way to this website. On the website, you'll find a number of different things. Including recipes. There's a doctor directory, so if you put in your zip code, you can find one of the few doctors that we're aware of that actually understand plant-based nutrition. If you need motivation, we have some success stories, both in written form and some little video clips of people who have taken control of their life and reversed their diseases through diet. And it does cost us money to give out these books. If you'd like to help us spread the word, we would certainly love a donation. These are some of the books that you'll be able to get from us. This first is actually a DVD, a documentary called Forks Over Knives, highly recommended. The China Study by Colin Campbell from Cornell University, awesome book. There's also a Spanish version of that for our Spanish-speaking friends. Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease, I've talked about that. The first half is about the science, the second half is a cookbook. Similarly, for the Starch Solution by John McDougall, the first half tells you about the science of nutrition, and the second half is a cookbook. Some of your other choices include Reversing Diabetes. If you or somebody you know has diabetes, they really need to read this book, How to Reverse It. Mad Cowboy is written by a cattle rancher who almost died from eating the products that he was raising. The Plant Advantage is about weight loss. Your Own Health is just sort of a fun book about a very serious topic. If you really just want to lose weight, weight loss book by Chef AJ is great. And if you just want a cookbook for some fancier dishes, Better Than Vegan is a good choice. So what are some strategies that you can do to make this change? You can do it yourself. Some people are good at that. Read one of our recommended books. Maybe you'll go on yourself to get some of the others and read them as well. Maybe you'll have friends that can pass books back and forth. Before you really get started on this, know where you're starting from. Take your medical measurements, your weight, your blood pressure, your cholesterol, and then spend some time researching what foods you like. You won't like all plant foods, all healthy foods, but there's so many of them out there. There are lots that you will just love, but experiment with that. And then if you're cooking for yourself, find out which of these healthy foods you're willing to cook. Some of them are easier, some are harder. Once you know what you're going to eat, go all in. This is like trying to break a cocaine habit. You know, for most people, tapering off slowly doesn't work very well. Psychologically, it's better to go all in. Some people succeed with tapering, but it's easier if you go cold turkey, if you will. Go all in. Do a 90-day challenge. I am not going to eat anything unhealthy for 90 days, and then we'll see where I'm at. If you can't commit to 90, do 60. If you can't do 60, commit to 30, but go all in. At the end of that challenge period, take your measurements again. Have you lost some weight? Has your cholesterol gone down? Has your blood sugar gone down? Has your energy gone up? Have you found that maybe you actually like eating these foods that are making you healthy? And then you can assess, and then maybe you'll decide, hey, I can stick with this for the rest of my life. And at some point, help others. If you don't want to study and you don't want to cook, there's another way. Just have your food delivered to you by Little Green Forks. You can go out and see the table out there where Petra is. She manages this food business. We deliver 5 days a week in this area. Of course, it's whole food, plant-based, no oil. These are some of my favorites. You'll have a green brochure in your packet. It has the web address, so you can go there and order. And it also has a coupon that's good for $15 off your first order of $30 or more. That's in the green brochure. These are some of the things I like. A burger that, with fries that aren't fried. Sweet potato bowl is awesome. Salads of various kinds. Soups, pad thai. There's a dessert that tastes like pumpkin pie that has no sugar, no dairy in it. It's awesome. There's a third way. If you need extra help, we started Tanner Care Health and Wellness Center, and we deliver programs that are 25 hours and 75 hours long, and each of those last a full year. We take groups of people through a class together, and they help each other through what some people find is a sort of a difficult challenge of changing their behavior. But it's not just a 1 week and then we leave you. It's a full year. It's heavy on the nutrition education, but there are some other components, especially the 75-hour program includes group support, mobility and strength training, yoga classes, and so on, and one-on-one access to the full professional staff, which includes MD, physical therapists, 2 nutritionists, and so on. Our first cohort started 6 years ago or so. We found that over the year time, average was 10% body weight loss. Significant improvement in lots of the measurements as we expected. Blood pressure went down, total cholesterol went down, glucose, mobility and energy went up, and some surprises. People had sleep better and had less pain. The newer, smaller program, 25-hour program, is really focused on moderate weight loss and diabetes prevention, and has 25 sessions, access to just our nutritionists, and if you are pre-diabetic, it may be paid for by insurance. So you could contact Petra out there and ask her about that. Some upcoming events. My next public talk is on April 7th. Unlike this one, it's about a half hour. This one will be an hour and a half. We can go much more in depth. It's offered via Zoom, so you can do it from your home or office. It's in the evening. If you want to order Little Green Forks food, you can order that and have it delivered 5 days a week. There's the coupon code. Again, it's on the back of the green sheet as well. And if you want to participate in the 25-hour program, we got the next one starting up in April 4th, and the intensive 75-hour one, April 26th, for anybody that you may know that needs some extra help. So this presentation today, both here and the table outside, were brought to you by 3 organizations: the Nutrition Science Foundation, which is a nonprofit, and I'm representing them today; Little Green Forks, which is a food company; and Tanner Care Health and Wellness Center, delivering programs for disease reversal. Both of those are managed by Petra Poshman, who's outside at the table. So thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you today, and I don't know if we have any time for questions. I don't see anybody pulling me off stage, so does anybody have a question? Yeah.
Can you touch base with the current situation of the COVID as well as alcoholism? Most people on the freeways, under the freeways, is because of alcohol.
Wow.
Doctor,
Yeah.
if I may interrupt you for a second, there's an orange mic there. If they have questions, they can actually go up there so everybody can hear it.
Great. For this particular one, let me repeat it. He's asking, what about COVID and what about alcoholism? COVID is an interesting one. The people who die most of COVID are ones who have comorbidities. That is, people who are suffering from other diseases, including heart disease, cancer, diabetes, high blood pressure. Those are the people who are dying of COVID more than people who don't have those diseases. So very early on, there was the thought that, if you eat a plant-based diet, you don't have those other diseases, and so maybe that would keep you from dying as much with COVID. Well, as the intervening years went on, they actually did a study, and they found very clearly that to be the case. Interestingly enough, it had very little effect on the infection rate. So you eat this perfect diet, you might still get infected with COVID, but your likelihood of death is way down. So that's good. Let's see, you asked about alcoholism. Alcohol is a poison. It's a toxin. People consume it for the effects on their brain, and yeah, that causes traffic accidents. The healthy diet would not include alcohol. But breaking alcoholism is a kind of a different problem than breaking eating fatty foods. We don't deal with that ourselves personally. I noticed there was a table out here titled Temperance. So, take those alcoholic people to that table and maybe they can get some help.
Is alcohol under the diet or nutrition?
No. It's a poison. Alcohol is a poison to many different systems throughout your body. Now, your liver can detoxify small amounts. So, if you need a cup of wine once a week in order to enable you to not eat any animal products the rest of the week, that might be a good trade-off. But, it's better if you don't ever introduce that toxin into your body.
I had a question up here, doctor. I'm a pharmacy technician, and what you were just telling me blew my mind, because actually everything that you were saying is the opposite that they tell us to do at the pharmacy. For example, specifically with the statins, they force us to call the patients and tell them you have to take statin medication because it'll be better for you in the long run and it'll give you better benefits and this and that. And now I'm thinking like everything they're telling us is a lie.
I'm glad you were able to say that. I don't want to insult pharmacists, but yeah, this is widespread.
Well, I think one of the issues is the way that they're being taught, right? So even as a doctor, you have to be careful that what they're telling you, you have to do your own research and say, okay, you're telling me this, let me figure it out. But from what I see, the doctors that I deal with, they just do what they're told. They're not having that critical thinking that they're supposed to have.
Absolutely correct. And you need to understand some of the dynamics of medical school. The tuition that potential doctors pay to get into med school is high, but it doesn't nearly cover the cost of medical school. Medical schools need to raise money. Where do they get that money from? They get it from companies that make drugs, and they get it from companies that make medical devices like stents. So when one of those companies comes up with this new drug, and they call the medical school and they'd say, we'd like to send one of our scientists to go lecture to your rising doctors about this new medicine, can the medical school say, no thanks, that isn't proven? No, they can't. They're dependent on that money. So the doctors get that all through medical school. Sorry, it's not just doctors, it's pharmacists, nutritionists. Many nutritionists come out of nutrition school with a completely warped set of things. You got to have animal protein to be healthy. Baloney. Sorry about that. Yeah.
What do you think about vaccination? That's really
Oh, you really want me to talk about vaccination?
Dr. Tanner,
Yeah.
now after your lecture, tell them they're waiting for the food demonstration.
Okay.
to start. Yeah, for
Okay. Should we cut it off soon or?
Yeah, it's already 12.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll answer that, and I'll answer one more question, and then we'll break to go. That fair enough? So vaccines. Ooh. I send out a newsletter every now and then capturing the research that I run across and sending it out to the folks who are interested. And I sent one out recently saying, you know, if you want to minimize COVID, eat a whole food plant-based diet and get a vaccine. And man, did I get a bunch of grief for that, because there's a bunch of people out there that think vaccines are evil, a hoax, and they point me to things that are not scientific in the least. I'm sorry, the science is really, really clear. Vaccines work. Some of the doctors say, oh, but I know somebody who is completely healthy, they took the vaccine and they died as a result. True. That can happen. But 1,000 times as many people that would have died without the vaccine don't die because they took the vaccine. So yes, there's a small risk, but there's 1,000 times greater risk if you don't get the vaccine. So I'm sorry if I've offended anybody who adheres to these notions that vaccines are damaging. Yes, they can be, but the percent is tiny compared to the benefit. Yeah.
You said you was very active. You used to run a mile every morning. What happened? You look like you were the other side. How did that happen to you?
So yes, I ran. He had said, "Didn't you run a mile before your heart attack?" Yes, I did. As I was recovering from the heart disease and learning this healthy diet, I talked to the doctor about my running, and he goes, 7 minutes, that's not enough. You need to have elevated heart rate for more than that. So I started running 2 miles a day. And then a couple years after that, my daughter, who was in high school, started running 5K, 5 kilometers, which is 3.1 miles. So I said, oh, if she can do it, why don't I try that? So now I run 3.1 miles every morning. Hey! It's, my time is not Olympic level time. I usually get in just under a half an hour in 3.1 miles. So that's what I also do, pull-ups and push-ups and other things.
So what caused you to have the heart attack?
I was eating the standard American diet that included cheese and meat and milk and eggs. That's what causes heart disease. So I don't know, in the running world, there was a guy by the name of Jim Fixx. Have you ever heard that name? Long-distance runner. And he published a book about running. And he said, if you can run a marathon in under 3 hours like he could, there's no way you can have heart disease, because all that exercise just burns it out. Absolutely false. In fact, they found him dead on the side of the road due to heart disease while running. He was the same age that I was when I had my heart attack, 52. Nobody saw him go down, so he died. He died because he was mistaken. So exercise is good. It cannot counter a bad diet. Just can't. I'd love to see all of you guys again. Maybe you can come to one of my online workshops, or eventually we'll get them back in person. But right now I believe there's a food demo going to be going on right outside, so let's go and take a look at that. Thank you so much.